Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm Anna Scott. I'm head of content at the Open Data Institute, and I'm joined by Data is Culture's co-directors Julie Freeman and Hannah Redler Hawes. So I'll introduce the Open Data Institute a bit. We're not an art organization, but we have an art program, as you know. For a bit of context, we were set up in 2012 by Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt. Our mission is to work with companies and governments around the world to build an open, trustworthy data ecosystem. And that's in support of our ultimate vision where, well, we want a world where data works for everyone, essentially. So I thought it would be quite useful to just walk through our theory of change. We want positive impacts with positive impacts with data. And we want to get there by ensuring that it's stewarded properly by organizations who hold and maintain it. It enables people to create things with it. So that might be tools, services, insights, artworks, stories. And then in order for people to decide what to do, they can draw on these things. And that might be deciding how to navigate their cities or deciding what their perspective is on something based on information they have. So there's a danger where companies and organizations hoard data. So we call this the sort of oil field, essentially, where data is treated like oil. And this kind of future is where we're more exposed to things like security risks and data breaches, because the value of data is limited to organizations that hold it and hoard it. We want to counter that with a sort of open culture. So open data, data infrastructure, more data literacy and capability for everyone, and innovation built on data that's as open as possible. On the other hand, there's a danger that through unaddressed legitimate concerns around how data is accessed and used, people don't share data about themselves. They withdraw consent, which might end up leading us to a situation where we have a kind of skewed view of society and its needs. And in order to counter that, we want to improve trust in how data is used and shared through things like data ethics, which is a kind of emerging field now. Equity around who benefits from data and making sure that the benefits are widely spread, and then more engagement, essentially, with the people who are involved. And the Data is Culture art program is a really good way of us engaging with the people involved and finding narratives where people can understand a bit more about data and data policy issues and how data is used. So I'll let Julie introduce the Data is Culture program.
Thanks, Anna. Hello, everyone. Data is Culture. Can you click to the next? So we've worked over the past 6 years with, we curated 9 exhibitions. We've exhibited about just over 100 artworks, and some of them you're going to see on the slides behind us as we have our discussion in a moment. We've worked with 65 artists, and we've worked with lots of different data types within those artworks, and we have a data taxonomy that we think about when we're looking at how data is used as an art material by different artists. And we've had really successful audience reach. We've had over 100,000 live audience members, and we've had millions of people accessing the work through online media and broadcast and so on. So in the 6 years, we think we've done fairly well for an arts program within an organisation that isn't set up specifically to do art projects. So, shall I just say, where are we now? So the art program, why have we got an art program? Why does the ODI get involved? And what does it bring to the ODI? And we thought that there's 3 main aims of the program, and one is inspiration and diversity. So we want to offer, through the artworks, we offer inspiration, and we bring a diversity of people and thinking to the programs of work that are being carried out within the ODI. The second one is about critical thinking, and we think that the art program helps people to think critically about the issues surrounding open, shared and closed data and how it reflects and affects our lives. And that's socially, economically and environmentally. And we feel like the role of the artists, the artworks and the curatorial program is to kind of stimulate often unasked questions, or questions that are difficult to ask within a sort of business context. And then cultural well-being is the third one, and we looked at the art program to be sort of nurturing organisational and staff cultural well-being. So we create a visually rich and engaging, thought-provoking and often disruptive environment in ODI HQ. And we provide space for new conversations to happen for those who know about data and for those who don't. And we have opportunities to have fun, moments to see the bigger picture and consider different contexts in which data can be used. And the art program brings all of that to the organisation. It's the only thing that's been there from the very beginning for 6 years, is managed to stay as part of the organisation's identity in amongst a series of rapid change.
So we've got a sort of stream of artworks that will continue to run as we talk. But I thought it would be quite useful for us to talk a little bit about some of the examples that you might want to draw on in terms of how artists have been brought into the organisation. Because it's an odd concept, right? We're in an office that mainly deals with data policy issues and helping companies understand their data strategies a bit more. But we're also surrounded by artworks. So we're quite fortunate to have that, I think, as an organisation. And more and more, we're actually engaging with the artists themselves. So they come to meetings, they ask us hard questions, which can be quite disruptive, as Julie says. But do you want to quickly talk about maybe the R&D artist, the embedded artist that we have at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So we're supposed to have some images rotating.
Oh, I don't think.
It's not, can we, do you want me to click through them?
No, the click.
On that. Hi. Sorry. So we have had a series. I think I'll just backtrack a little bit to say that open process has been at the heart of the Data as Culture programme since Julie founded it in 2012, and I joined it at her invitation in 2014. But the first couple of years of the programme operated on an open call basis, so artists were invited to submit to various exhibitions and opportunities. And then in 2015, we invited artists to come and be artists in residence for the first time, although Julie was already, as an artist and a curator, she was an artist in residence, but we sort of formed some formal residencies. And they were quite general artists in residence, and it worked very well. But last year, we decided that we would invite an artist to be specifically engaged as a team member on one of the pieces of core business, which is an R&D program funded by the government, to look into a huge swathe of issues and challenges relating to data, one of which is data trust and sharing. So we have an artist called Alastair Gentry, who's a performance artist, and he has spent the last 6-7 months researching data trust and sharing. He's come up with an idea that will be performed to the public. I can't really say much more about it there, but he has been a team member. He has come to meetings, and he has challenged us. I don't know if there was a specific thing you wanted to say further about that.
Not really. I just think it's useful to have an example of how art has been embedded in the organisation. But that kind of leads me to a question around the value of diversity, because Alastair is a very different kind of person from most of the people in the organisation, in that he is an artist. He sees things slightly differently. How do you see the value of diversity being important within these kinds of conversations?
Well, at the end of the day, the Data as Culture programme is to bring in diverse perspectives. And I think we realised after a couple of years that the perspectives, whilst being different to the technological and ideological perspectives of many of the staff working there, they were very diverse in gender. We had really good gender equality in the programme, but it wasn't it was mostly white people, so there weren't very many people of colour, there weren't very many people of different sexual orientation, or it wasn't as representative as we felt it should be. And so we had to really look at our process and say, it's one thing being an open call, but how can an open call be more open? So we went to speak to people like Debs. We spoke to Debs Williams, and we spoke to pioneering media artists, Gary Stewart and Derek Richards, all of whom are artists of colour. So what are we doing wrong here, where we're putting out an open call and we're still not getting a very representative group of artists coming back to us? And a lot of questions were raised about language, about reaching out, about where you position things, when you position things, and a really important question that isn't actually answered yet, but which Debs raised. She said, maybe the data's not about us. And I thought that was really, really powerful, because it immediately turned the attention on the assumption that everyone should care about data. Who's the data for? Who's making it? So we worked with Debs and Gary and Richard to raise some questions for ourselves that challenged our process, and to really think about how we phrased open calls and to think about how we who we spoke to reach out to share our open calls so that we reached a wider group. And I suppose I'd say that one thing that's been successful is we have 4 artists we're working with at the moment, and 2 of those are artists of colour, 1 is a gay man. So I feel that we've started to walk the walk.
And I think one of the things that the art programme has done by sort of following this process and looking at our own sort of recruitment of artists, and that's trickled up to the organisation as a whole. So we were kind of quite quick, I think we were quite fleet of foot to be able to notice this and to sort of act on it. And then we asked a load of questions at one of the ODI Summit 2014 or 15, and then that has now been taken more on board by the wider organisation. So it has an impact internally linked to that.
And what were some of the things that you learned in terms of how to improve the language, for example, or in terms of how you're positioning questions? Because I think a lot of people, quite with all the will in the world, might say, well, we've had an open call, so it's not our fault if we don't get a responsive or a diverse group of people. Were there any kind of lessons you learned from that?
I think you have to really just you have to make a massive effort. Mm-hmm. You have to put in the legwork. You have to recognise the language that you're using, and you have to consult, again, people like Debs, and make sure that you make it really clear that you're looking for people for a diverse range of responses, and then go out and sometimes just individually talk to organisations that have access to those particular artists.
It was also the first time we used, Debs helped us phrase a phrase that said, we actively welcome applications from artists of colour, people who are neurodiverse, and people with different visual and oral abilities. I can't remember the exact wording. But to be honest, we didn't get a particularly diverse response to that application. So the next time we used similar wording, we updated it actually. We checked in with Debs again, are we up to date? We also, that was when we went out and actively sought people. So speak to people, who do you know? Because the reality is that any artist of colour will tell you, you can't as a curator just look in all the magazines and all the books and all the current exhibitions and find all the people making the most important work, because the system is changing, and it's quite an exciting time where patriarchal and empirical attitudes to curating and exhibition making and cultural production are shifting, but it's a slow movement. And so all the natural places you go for research, or the easiest accessed actually, not the natural, are not necessarily full of all the people that you want to find.
I mean, we actively chose to work with an organisation called Birmingham Open Media, and they've just in Birmingham, and they've just redone their gallery to be more neurodiverse sort of friendly. So they have a very quiet coffee machine. They have spaces
completely silent,
which is amazing. So we thought we'll work with them, and then through them we can work with a neurodiverse audience and set of participants. So we reach out in those kind of ways.
And it's work in progress. I mean, it's beginning to be as diverse as we want it to be in the last 8 months. I mean, it's really, really new.
We were talking earlier a little bit about the danger of lack of diversity, and I think sometimes it kind of helps to flip the question a bit. And do you have any, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now, we didn't even rehearse this bit, but what are your concerns around a lack of diversity in art in general?
It's monoculture. And you're not, lots of people talk about art as a mirror, but it's a very distorted mirror if it's just reflecting back what you think you know, and then it's the whole social media echo chamber. There's no point having just one culture represented, because you're just reinforcing perceived ideas, you're not developing thinking, and you're not representing the whole community.
And in the tech world particularly, there is a sort of culture of very, the sort of Silicon Valley demographic that we really need to reach out from and avoid being caught up in that.
2 seconds, but I'll just quickly finish by saying that I asked our CEO earlier why we still have the Data is Culture programme despite everything, despite funding concerns, despite busyness and all sorts
Dead cats in the ceiling.
yeah. And she said it helps us have, or it gives us another route into the conversation. And I think that's a really profound point from her. But we're out of time, so thank you very much.
I'm looking for the cat. Sorry.
Oh. Yeah, I sit underneath a taxidermy cat, which is a fairly odd thing to be doing.
Do you know,
One of the sculptures.
I had the clicker upside down, so I'm going backwards, that's why. Let me find it.
There it is.
Oh. So this is the most diverse artist in the ceiling. It's actually a cat.
Well, thank you very
So,
much.
thank you all very much indeed.